The power of Haitian heritage and the strength of the Haitian people is tremendous, and Haiti holds a unique and rich role in the history of African Americans. As you know, in this country Anglo-Americans are about 75 to 76% home ownership in this country, where Hispanics, African Americans are less than 50%. Well, I'm a daughter of the Great Migration as, really, the majority of African Americans that you meet in the North and West are products of the Great Migration. It's that massive. Many of us owe our very existence to the fact that people migrated. Indians were here first. It's about time. We're way behind the African Americans and Hispanic Americans in getting politically involved, but we're beginning to take a page out of their notebook. Really, the potential for, first of all, any college graduate today is enormously good. These are good times for anyone with a college degree today, particularly African Americans. With a college degree today, you really breach the unemployment rate. When you talk about evangelicals, don't forget that a significant proportion of the evangelical community is African American, and most African Americans, well over 90%, thoroughly evangelical, thoroughly biblical, will probably vote Democratic. While he was in the service, in the South and in Oklahoma, he was refused service at a couple of places where he was in uniform, and was told that African Americans, blacks, Negroes, were not served. And in spite of that, I've never known a man who loved this country more than my father did. When you do a film, you know you're shooting for 6 or 9 weeks, you've got your cast and crew. Overall, no one can just pull the plug and say, this isn't working. There's just no security on television, especially for African Americans. It's a tough market. Liberal whites are the greatest enemy of African Americans. Donald intends to represent all the people, not just some of the people. That includes Christians and Jews and Muslims, it includes Hispanics and African Americans and Asians, and the poor and the middle class. Throughout his career, Donald has successfully worked with people of many faiths and with many nations. Since 1957, black people have experienced double-digit unemployment, in good times and bad times. Look at the population of African Americans in prison. They represent more than half the population of prisoners in the country, 55% of those on death row. My sister is a good story of resiliency. She had a full ride at UC Davis, but she left school to go to the Philippines, and then she decided to go back to school in her 40s, which surprised me. She went to UC Berkeley, and I think she was one of 2 African Americans in her class at Haas. She's really impressive. Delaware State is no longer a college for African Americans without other choices, it is a university of choice. I would argue that the objective evidence shows that big government is not a friend to African Americans. I was well known to African Americans before Bill Clinton discovered me. He was like Christopher Columbus riding up on something he didn't understand. America is not perfect. It took a bloody civil war to free over 4 million African Americans who lived enslaved. It took another 100 years after that before they achieved full equality under the law. As NYC public advocate, I released a report that showed that stop-and-frisks of African Americans in 2012 were barely half as likely to yield a weapon as those of white New Yorkers, and a third less likely to yield contraband. Despite this evidence, the vast majority of those stopped are young black and Latino men. American high school culture was impenetrable to me, and very cliquey. You had the Hispanics, the African Americans, the surfer guys and the goths and the immigrants. The jocks and the surfers got the girls. By the time I'd got to grips with it, I'd graduated. What we, as African Americans, stood on was our faith. African Americans have always known that a little bit of paranoia was healthy for us. I think there is a big difference between expressing the pain and anger that many African Americans and other people of color may feel versus language that I think now crosses the line and goes into hate. I think what happened during the Great Depression was that African Americans understood that Republicans championed citizenship and voting rights, but they became impatient for economic emancipation. People have been killing because of racial differences since the time of Adam and Eve, but in this country racism has been primarily aimed at African Americans. When we say, look, Donald Trump was a friend to hip-hop back in the day, so was Bill Clinton, it doesn't mean that because he was a friend to hip-hop back in the day, that the same Bill Clinton wasn't at the lead of this mass incarceration of African Americans today. The separate water foundations, park benches, bathrooms and restaurants of the Jim Crow South startled me. These experiences motivated my lifelong study of the status of African Americans and the sources of improvement in that status. Groups like the NAACP, the Anti-Defamation League, NOW and GLAAD, will respond to derisive language directed at their constituents. The price paid by those who cavalierly chose to verbally disrespect the dignity of African Americans, Jews, women and homosexuals is steep. African Americans make up about 13% of the U.S. population but comprise 32% of patients treated for kidney failure, giving them a kidney failure rate that is 4.2 times greater than that of white Americans. We must never forget that Black history is American history. The achievements of African Americans have contributed to our nation's greatness. The large ensemble cast and the fact that it was being shot in New York, combined with a lot of strong positive images as far as African Americans are concerned, really turned me on to The Best Man. Historically Black colleges and universities, or HBCUs, have played an important role in enriching the lives of not just African Americans, but our entire country. Civil rights was not an impossible dream. Thousands of brave African Americans stepped forward to make it happen. I have a very personal interest. I am a Miami-Dade voter. One of the issues is that my vote and so many other votes of women and African Americans in Florida are being discounted or discarded. I want my vote to count. The people who suffer in the Obama economy have been young people, African Americans, Hispanics, single moms. During the days of segregation, there was not a place of higher learning for African Americans. They were simply not welcome in many of the traditional schools. And from this backward policy grew the network of historical Black colleges and universities. Just because a Black man is running the RNC doesn't mean Black folks are going to, oh, okay, I will be a Republican. Just as with the election of President Obama, all the problems and concerns that are very important to African Americans don't get solved overnight. I know there has long been a great frustration among the African Americans in Nevada over their belief that we have not adequately responded to their desires to become more educated and more productive citizens. I was able to Sleep with Anger, a very powerful film about African Americans, their spirituality, and the things that happened within a small community and a family. Sports and entertainment have always been windows of opportunity for African Americans, when other doors were closed. And when the time is right, I hope that African Americans will again look to the party of emancipation, civil liberty, and individual freedom. We African Americans have now spent the major part of the 20th century battling racism. For complicated historical and political reasons, we associate poor in our public consciousness with Black. Terms such as welfare queen and culture of poverty became associated uniquely with the social maladies of African Americans in urban ghettos, despite the fact that poor whites outnumbered poor Blacks. The sprinkling of people of color through elite institutions in the United States, due to affirmative action policies and the limited progress of middle-class and upper-middle-class African Americans, creates the illusion of great progress. I do believe that there are African Americans who have thick accents. My mom has a thick accent, my relatives have thick accents. But sometimes you have to adjust when you go into the world of film, TV, theater, in order to make it accessible to people. What we forget is that African Americans made the largest contribution to America, economically, before the Civil War of any sector of society. I read that the railroads were worth about $2 billion, but slavery was a $3 billion asset. As long as white people put people of color, African Americans and Latinos, in the same dispensable bag, and look at our children of color as insignificant and treat women of color as not as deserving of protection as white women, we will never achieve true equality. Every day in America, African Americans are reminded of their race in ways large and small. Every day. Currently, more than 4.7 million African Americans receive Social Security benefits, and nearly 8 million people with disabilities depend on Social Security for their daily sustenance. The highest percentage of African Americans own their own homes today than ever in our nation's history. Typically, during recessionary times, particular groups suffer higher rates of unemployment: African Americans, and Latinos, and in some cases other minority groups. If you don't have a high level of training or education, you're going to fall into that category. Barack Obama's victories in 2008 and 2012 were dismissed by some of his critics as merely symbolic for African Americans. But there is nothing Amir about symbols. Visit our website for more quotes, quoting.com.